Hey guys, what's up? I have had quite a bit of interest in some of my cast iron cooking and um, how refinish or finish my cast iron pans. So I'm gonna show a little video about that. Um, what I've got here is a Lodge um, chicken fryer. So I think this is a 5-quart pan. I'm not 100% sure. This is a brand new from Lodge or from Amazon Lodge pan that is Lodge pre-seasoned, but as some of you guys know, has an incredibly rough finish. Um, this just not a good finish. The pan came with a lid. It's not very expensive at all. Has some very rough casting marks. This almost looks like a cutting torch right around here. We're going to try to get rid of some of that. And then on the handle, there's a little bead right here from a casting that we're going to try to get this out as well. It kind of eats into your hand pretty good. Now, this pan should be really cool. It was not expensive at all. I want to say $30, maybe 40. It came with a very nice fitting lid. Lodge does a good job of casting the iron, but they're for the price point, you just don't get the finish. So this video is going to show you what I do to put a very smooth polish on them, and then season it up and get it ready to cook. All right, a little word about the tools we're going to be using to do this. In shallower pans, one of my favorite tools is this Makita cordless 4.5-inch grinder. This thing is just a workhorse. We use it all the time during my normal job. It works very well with a cutting blade or with a grinder, either one. With the Makita for these cast iron pans, we're going to be using a flap disc. This one is a Norton 40 grit, 60 grit, 80 grit, 40 grit, whatever, pretty much whatever you can find. We like the flap disc because we're polishing, not so much grinding. So we'll use this a little bit, probably not as much, because it's a deep pan, and I don't know about this throat depth, whether we can get it in there and polish the pan flat. So a lot of what we're going to be using for this is our air polisher. This has a relock, basically the same thing with a flap disc. So flap disc with a little locking button on it. I don't know exactly. I think it's called relock. A little like 3-inch disc. These can be had at Amazon. They're really cheap. So probably most of what we're going to be doing with the chicken fryer is going to be this guy right here, because of this throat depth, and that means we can get down inside the pan and go flat on the pan instead of trying to gouge. So we'll finish up with something like this. This is pretty well just a Scotch-Brite polishing pad. They work very well for polishing. Yeah. So those are basically our tools. Hearing protection is, I mean, if you're grinding, it's kind of like, oh, what's the point? But I'm here to tell you, I have pretty bad hearing loss, and some kind of hearing protection is worth having. Eye protection for sure. Gloves, yeah, you probably need them. But for sure, eye protection and hearing protection. Also, don't do this in a place where this is going to throw off a lot of cast iron dust, and cast iron dust immediately turns to rust. I mean, within an hour. If there's any humidity at all, within an hour, it turns to rust. So if you do it on a painted surface or in your garage against the wall, and there's any humidity in your garage, the cast iron dust is going to turn to rust. So I'm going to use a tree stump in my yard, and I'm wearing, old clothes that I've actually used this shirt for a couple other pans, and try not to ruin anything. So that's one takeaway. For sure, that's one takeaway, is when you do this, it creates a lot of cast iron dust, and that stuff rusts really bad. So keep that in mind. We're going to set up the air compressor and get to work. Okay, we've just started with the 4-inch grinder. Let me show you a little bit about what we're doing here. So areas like this are areas that this has taken off a little bit more material, or the material in the beginning was higher. So areas like this that are a little darker in color instead of this nice silvery color still have quite a bit of the old seasoning left, the old pan. So this is not smooth. And then we look down here, and this little guy right here is like an actual hole. There's something you probably would never see with the eye, but you can certainly feel it with your finger. So it's probably a 30-second deep or so. It's not big, but it's definitely a hole. So what we're trying to do is make this surface uniform. So we want pretty well all of this to be nice silver, nice uniform color. So you can kind of see this side I haven't touched yet. It's still very rough, and it gets a little smoother over here where I have messed with it. I've done this lip and the handle, so now this handle's nice and smooth and won't tear up anybody's hands. So you can see right here, there's a little deformity right there. This darker black is actually deeper. So I'm gonna try to knock all those out, make it all nice and smooth. Okay, a couple observations I'd like to make is right now this surface is actually getting pretty smooth, but we still have lots and lots and lots of little puck marks. So what happens now, we've taken off like the top layer of scratchy, and it doesn't scratch like it did. So what you're going to experience now is it's going to be quite a bit more work to take this off down to these little pits. So at this point you can cut it good or keep going. We're going to keep going. One thing, Lodge makes a hell of a pan, but they're not nearly as light as a Griswold. So I don't believe that it's going to hurt anything to remove a bunch of material. All of these little puck marks, we're going to try to get down and remove material to get down and make these smooth. The other thing I want to point out is I'm using a used, already has been used flap disc. When you have a brand new flap disc, they're very, very aggressive. So if you haven't used one before, you may not want to use it for the first time on your brand new pan. They can get out of hand pretty quick and scar up the side of the pan, which it's cast iron pan. It's not going to kill it. It's just going to look weird. Maybe it's a scar that you're going to tell everybody about for the rest of your life, you know, when you're cooking steaks or whatever. But I just want that to be out there, that new flap discs are very aggressive. So I tend to not use new ones on things like this. If I can get away with it. If I have to use a new one because my old ones are trash, then that's what you got to do. And just, you have to be super careful, not use a lot of pressure, and you know, just try to keep from scarring. Okay guys, I called an audible. This particular pan was pretty bad, as far as highs and lows and little puck marks that we couldn't get out. So I switched flap disc out for just a regular grinder disc. Very, very aggressive. If you guys are going to do this with a grinder disc, just make for sure you don't stay in any place for one time. Move it all around. Keep the disc moving. For sure, you don't want to just use light pressure all over the place. See, I've got quite a few swirl marks. Generally, swirl marks are bad when using a grinder. We don't want that. But what they do in this instance, these swirl marks will give us a reference with which to polish out. So what we're going to end up doing now, instead of polishing out our puck marks from the casting, we're going to end up polishing out to the swirl marks. So we're fixing to get started with that. I'm going to start with the 4.5 inch flap sander, and then we may move to the air polisher. Okay, review a little bit. We've had the 4-inch sander to start, and then we switched to the 4-inch grinder, and then we switched back to the 4-inch flap disc. That's what I meant at the beginning. So here's where we're at right now. So you can see for sure we have some kind of a polish, some kind of a mirror It's definitely better than it was. So what we're gonna do now is switch over to the air polisher. I said we were probably gonna use that first, but it ended up we didn't. Switch over to the air polisher and polish out as much of the rest of this rough as we can, and as mirror finish as possible is what we're looking for. Okay, after a few hours of grinding and polishing, this is what we've ended up with. This is a pretty smooth surface. It's not quite a mirror, but you can kind of see things in the surface. It's actually really smooth. There's a few grinder marks here that we didn't get out. This transition is a little bit rough, but I know from the other pans I've done that's not that big of a deal. You can see a few marks here, but you can see, like right here where my fingers are, how mirror, how polished that is. And we've pretty much done what we wanted to do with the air sander, the air polisher, and the air flap discs and the Scotch-Brite pads. So this is pretty well what we wanted. Now we're gonna season it, put it in the oven, and see what happens. Okay, so we're here in the kitchen with our newly slicked off pan, and man, this thing is really slick. Doesn't really, especially this bottom, I mean, doesn't really catch. Didn't really catch anywhere. Yeah, I think it's gonna be really good. So what we've done is we're on the seasoning process right now. We're using this product, Larrabee stick. Larrabee stick. I don't know what exactly it's pronounced. Larrabee stick. My understanding is this is a lard based with beeswax product for seasoning cast iron. I've never used it before. This is the first time, so we're going to give it a shot. Directions on the back. We're basically just following those directions. Put this initial layer probably a little bit thick on, but we did preheat to 200 and put a light coat in, and then we're gonna put it into 400 and stick it for an hour and let it cool down and cook eggs in the morning. So let's see what happens. Alright, here we are after our first seasoning. We'll season it probably a couple more times, but it's turned out very nice. Nice smooth handle.